I want to bring in Dan Balz. He's the chief correspondent for the Washington Post. Dan, let's talk about the president's response to Barcelona. His first tweet, very par for the course. He has been, of course, under fire for how he handled Charlottesville, not calling it terrorism. He was very quick to call this incident terrorism. And indeed, that's in agreement with all the authorities out of Spain. Was that the appropriate response?
I think it was. It was pretty swift and it was to the point. It was clear that this was a terrible, terrible terrorist attack in Barcelona. And I think the president was correct in moving quickly to put the weight of the United States behind efforts to try to do something about it. And so that was appropriate. I thought that the second tweet was wholly unexpected and unnecessary and, a repetition of, as you said, a debunked mythology about General Pershing that he used many times on the campaign trail, despite the fact that it was repeatedly debunked.
Let's look at that tweet here. It says, quote, "Study what General Pershing of the United States did to terrorists when caught. There was no more radical Islamic terror for 35 years. I know that he brought this anecdote, which has been debunked, on the campaign trail. But again, to basically condone extrajudicial executions as a response to terrorism, sitting from the bully pulpit, Dan, is he going to get heat for this?
Well, he'll certainly get heat for this. I mean, he got heat for suggesting it during the campaign, and now he's the president of the United States. And when you're the president of the United States, your words are weighed even more critically in moments like this. This is a moment in which efforts to bring people together are more important than kind of stoking the fears, particularly with the kinds of things he did in that tweet. I mean, it was rather shocking that he would so quickly go to that in a situation like this. And I think that already there's criticism of him. And given the aftermath of what happened in Charlottesville, it's just another episode that's going to cause people to question the way the president responds at moments of stress and crisis.
And again, that incident with General Pershing has been debunked by historians. From a political standpoint, and I don't want to be too cynical, but you have to put this, of course, in the context of our president wanting to ban immigrants and visitors from certain Muslim countries. And if this was indeed Islamic terrorism, would you expect the president to, in some ways, use this incident in Spain as yet another example to back up his harsh stance on immigration and on visitors from Muslim-majority nations?
Well, I think he may well do that. And there are many people who think that we need to have more secure borders than we have. There is controversy over the way the Trump administration is carrying that out. But I think one of the reasons that President Trump got elected was that he articulated a feeling on the part of a lot of people, A, of insecurity because of Islamic terrorism, and B, a sense that our borders have been too porous and that people can get in who should not be here and who could threaten the livelihoods of people. Now, having said that, I mean, the incidents of domestic terrorism have not been from the countries that have been segmented off in the travel ban that he's proposed. So, I mean, there's a lot of discussion on all of that, but it wouldn't be surprising if he again talks about the need to protect the United States and to protect the borders of the United States.
Speaking of domestic terrorism, as I said earlier, the president never called what happened in Charlottesville domestic terrorism, even though the Attorney General Jeff Sessions and many others did say it could be characterized that way. So let's switch gears to Charlottesville. The president is again weighing in on the Confederate statue debate and earlier called their removal, quote, sad. He also called the statues, quote, beautiful. Why does a guy from Queens care so much about defending Confederate history?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, and I think only Donald Trump can explain that. I think that what we're seeing is him doubling down on the positions he initially took on Charlottesville last Saturday, when he said that the responsibility for what happened and for the violence was borne on many sides, he said. He issued, obviously, a statement on Monday that was praised for singling out neo-Nazis and white supremacists and Klansmen and for criticizing them sharply, but he undid that on Tuesday with that quite angry press conference at Trump Tower. Now, in the wake of that, to take up the cause of preserving the Confederate statutes seems to be an unnecessary weighing in on a topic that, while it's going to be debated in a lot of different places, is not something that is going to be helpful to the president at a time when he's under such criticism for the way he's been handling the Charlottesville aftermath.
There are a lot of people buzzing today about a wide-ranging interview that was published with White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, weighing in on those white supremacists marching in Charlottesville, in which he says, quote, "Ethno-nationalism, it's losers. It's a fringe element." He goes on to say these guys are a collection of clowns. Now, this is interesting because Bannon is often associated with the alt-right movement. He once described his former platform, which he was head of, Breitbart News, as being a platform for the alt-right movement. Is it surprising to hear him make these comments?
Well, not necessarily, because he's always said he is a nationalist, not a white supremacist. And in his mind, there is a distinction between those two. So he can call out neo-Nazism and Klansmen and white supremacists on the one hand, and hold nationalist views, America first in the shorthand that the president has often used, as a worldview that he believes is entirely legitimate. So I think in his own mind, those two are probably separable.
He apparently, though, likes this debate that's going on about racial identity politics. And that leads to my next question. Are there risks to Democrats calling for more removals of Confederate history? I found it very interesting that Steve Bannon said in that same interview, quote, "The longer Democrats talk about identity politics and racism, the more Trump benefits." What do you think of that? Is this all strategic on the part of the president?
Well, I don't know. That may be giving him too much credit. He operates instinctively and viscerally, and I don't know that it always is out of some grand strategic design that he has. He has certain feelings about certain issues, and they coincide in some ways with some of the views of Stephen Bannon. But in this case, I mean, I think that, you know, we're dealing with a situation in which there was an ongoing debate about what to do about Confederate statues. That debate is going to intensify as a result of what happened in Charlottesville, and we've seen that intensification just this week. I think there is a danger for Democrats if they overreact at a moment like this. They may well be on the side that is going to prevail in a lot of these debates. We've seen these statues come down in a number of places. We've seen a very strong articulation of the reasons for that by the mayor of New Orleans when they went through this only a few weeks or months ago. We're going to see more of that. You know, this is something that has to be carried out carefully. And, you know, I think that, you know, that Bannon has a point in saying that if the Democrats or the left overreact to this, it could drive people in a different direction. So we're going to have to see how this debate plays out. But I think all of the evidence is that it is moving in the direction of people who say it is time to take these statues and put them in a different place than in the center of parks and cities and places where they become symbols to a lot of people in America, symbols of hate and of a terrible time in the nation's history.
How much other fallout would you expect from this Steve Bannon interview? There have been talks and rumors for weeks that he could be on the outs. He seemed to also undermine, by the way, the president's position on a military solution being locked and loaded for North Korea. How much more fallout are you expecting?
Well, I expect there's going to be a fair amount of talk about what this is going to mean for Steve Bannon's future in the White House. But he has survived at least one earlier episode when, you know, a lot of the speculation was that he was close to being pushed out of the White House. We will go through another round of that. But, you know, that's ultimately up to the president and Steve Bannon to decide when his time ends at the White House. So I don't want to prejudge where that's going to go based on what we've already seen.
Dan Balz with The Washington Post. Thanks a lot, Dan.
Thank you.